The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple. A group of teenagers, their laughter echoing in the stillness, stood before the behemoth. The abandoned factory loomed over them, a skeletal silhouette against the dying light. "You too scared, Mikey?" Jessica's voice, sharp with amusement, cut through the air. She leaned against the gate, her silhouette a study in teenage bravado. Michael, his face pale in the fading light, met her gaze, but backing down in front of his friends, especially Jessica, was not an option. The rusted hinges groaned in protest, the sound like a scream echoing in the stillness. As the gate creaked open, a flock of crows took flight from the roof, their raucous cries adding to the eerie symphony. With a shared glance, they stepped onto the factory grounds. The gravel crunched under their feet, unnaturally loud in the stillness. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and forgotten memories. Cobwebs clung to every surface like ghostly shrouds. A sliver of moonlight cast long dancing shadows. They moved deeper, their voices hushed, replaced by uneasy silence. The air grew colder, sending shivers down their spines. The silence was unnerving, broken only by their breathing and pounding hearts. "This place is creepy," whispered Emily. She moved closer to Mark, seeking comfort. He put a protective arm around her, scanning their surroundings. They reached a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in the darkness above. Broken machinery littered the floor, skeletal remains of a bygone era. A single window high up on the far wall allowed a sliver of moonlight to pierce the gloom, illuminating a swirling cloud of dust. The silence here was different, heavier, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The air crackled with an unseen energy, sending goosebumps erupting on their skin. They had crossed a threshold, stepped into a place where time stood still, and something else, something unseen, watched their every move. A low hum vibrated through the floor, barely perceptible at first. It grew slowly, steadily, until the air itself seemed to thrum with it. The teenagers exchanged nervous glances, their eyes wide with apprehension. The sound was unnatural, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. "What is that?" whispered Jessica, her bravado finally cracking. She took a step back, bumping into Michael, who was staring at the far end of the chamber, his eyes wide with terror. Following his gaze, they saw it. A massive machine, its iron limbs twisted and broken, stood bathed in the pale moonlight. It was a hulking monstrosity, its gears frozen in time, its purpose long forgotten. Yet, as they watched, the impossible happened. The gears began to turn, slowly at first, then faster and faster, with a grinding metallic screech that sent shivers down their spines. The hum intensified, vibrating through the floor and up their legs, until it felt like their bones would shatter. The machine shuddered violently, its gears gnashing, as if struggling to break free from its metal prison. Panic surged through the group. They stumbled back, their eyes glued to the monstrous machine that seemed to be coming to life before their very eyes. Its gears spun with unnatural speed, sparks showering from its metal joints like a shower of fiery tears. "We need to get out of here," shouted Mark, his voice high with fear. He grabbed Emily's hand and they ran, their footsteps echoing in the vast chamber, their fear lending speed to their flight. They ran blindly, their hearts pounding in their chests, the sound of the awakening machine echoing behind them. The darkness seemed to press in on them, the air thick with the smell of ozone and a metallic tang that made their stomachs churn. The floor was uneven beneath their feet, littered with debris, forcing them to slow down. Each stumble, each gasp for breath amplified their terror. They were lost in a labyrinth of steel and shadow, hunted by something they couldn't understand. As they rounded a corner, they were met by a wall of solid darkness. The air grew colder, if that was possible, and a sense of dread washed over them. Whispers seemed to emanate from the darkness, faint and indistinct, yet filled with an ancient malice. "This way!" Michael yelled, his voice cracking. He pointed to a narrow passage that snaked between towering shelves laden with rusted tools and forgotten parts. It was a desperate gamble, but their only option. The narrow passage opened into a long corridor, its end lost in darkness. The air here was stifling, thick with the smell of decay and something else, something akin to rotting flesh. The whispers followed them, growing louder, more insistent, as if whatever lurked in the shadows was toying with them. And then they saw them. Shadows, darker than the surrounding darkness, moved along the walls. They writhed and twisted, taking on grotesque shapes that seemed to mock their terror. They were not simply shadows, they were alive, animated by a malevolent force that sent chills down their spines. The shadows stretched and contorted, reaching out towards the teenagers with long skeletal fingers. A cold dread gripped their hearts, a primal fear that sent them scrambling back, desperate to escape the nightmare unfolding before their eyes. The floor seemed to tilt beneath their feet, the walls closing in, threatening to crush them. The whispers intensified, becoming guttural growls, the sounds of some monstrous predator closing in on its prey. They were trapped, ensnared in a web of terror, from which there seemed to be no escape. "Run!" Michael's voice, hoarse with terror, cut through the oppressive atmosphere. He didn't need to tell them twice. They were already running, their legs pumping, their lungs burning, their every thought focused on escape. The shadows pursued them, their movements fluid and swift, their forms shifting and changing, always just out of reach, yet always closing in. They darted down corridors, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness, their breath coming in ragged gasps, the taste of fear metallic in their mouths. The air grew thick with the dust kicked up by their frantic flight, making it hard to breathe, hard to see. They coughed and spluttered, their eyes stinging, their vision blurring, but they didn't dare slow down, not with the shadows hot on their heels. The factory itself seemed to be working against them, the floor shifting beneath their feet, the walls seeming to close in, barring their way. They were lost in a maze of metal and shadow, the exit a distant memory, their hope dwindling with every passing second. The chase seemed to stretch on forever, a terrifying game of cat and mouse played out in the heart of the abandoned factory. The teenagers, their energy flagging, their hope dwindling, pushed their bodies to the limit, driven by pure adrenaline and terror. They could hear the shadows behind them, their growls echoing in the corridors, their forms flickering at the edge of their vision. The air was thick with the stench of decay and something else, something ancient and evil. They stumbled through a doorway and found themselves in a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in the darkness above. A single shaft of moonlight pierced through a broken window, illuminating swirling dust motes and the skeletal outlines of long, silent machines. There, in the center of the chamber, stood the massive machine, its gears grinding, its metal limbs flailing, as if it were the one giving birth to the shadows, its very essence fueling their malevolent existence. As they stared at the monstrous machine, despair threatened to engulf them. They were trapped, surrounded by the shadows, with nowhere left to run. But then, a glimmer of hope emerged from the darkness. Jessica, her eyes darting around the chamber, spotted a faint light in the distance. "This way!" she yelled, her voice surprisingly strong despite their ordeal. She pointed towards a doorway, partially hidden in the shadows. They didn't hesitate, didn't question her. They followed blindly, their desperation giving them a burst of speed. They raced toward the light, their footsteps echoing in the vast chamber, their hearts pounding a frantic rhythm against their ribs. The shadows closed in, their growls louder now, their forms more distinct, their skeletal fingers reaching out, grasping for them. The teenagers could feel the chill of their touch, the icy breath of the abyss on their necks. The doorway led to a narrow staircase that spiraled upwards into the darkness. They didn't hesitate, didn't look back. They climbed, their lungs burning, their legs screaming for respite, but they pushed on, driven by the promise of escape. The air grew colder, the smell of decay stronger as they ascended. The shadows seemed to hesitate at the foot of the stairs, their growls turning into frustrated hisses as if they were unable to follow. They finally emerged onto the roof of the factory, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and terror. The cool night air hit their faces like a blast of freedom. The moon, full and bright, bathed the rooftop in an eerie glow. But their relief was short-lived. As they turned to catch their breath, they saw that the shadows had found another way. They swirled and coalesced on the roof across from them, their forms solidifying, taking on a more menacing shape. They were silhouetted against the moonlit sky, their forms vaguely humanoid, yet twisted and grotesque. They seemed to draw strength from the darkness, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The teenagers, trapped on the rooftop, their backs against the edge of the abyss, could only watch in horror as the shadows advanced. Their escape route was cut off, their hope dwindling with each passing moment. And then they saw it. A fire escape, rusted and precarious, clung to the edge of the building. It was their only chance. Without a word, they scrambled towards it, their movements fueled by desperation. They made it out, their escape a blur of adrenaline and terror. They didn't stop running until they were far away from the abandoned factory, its silhouette a dark stain against the horizon. They had escaped with their lives, but they knew deep down that the horror wasn't over. The shadows still lingered in their minds, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. And sometimes, in the dead of night, they could swear they heard the distant echo of grinding gears and felt the icy breath of the abyss on their necks. If you liked this video, like it and subscribe to my channel.